Hello, this is Christel. Nice to hear you, John.
Hi.
So, how are you? It's morning at your
Yeah,
place,
I'm in
right?
Montreal. It's 9 a.m.
Okay, it's 3 p.m. here, so almost coffee
Nice.
time. Right, John, thank you, first of all, for joining this little
Sure.
interview. And I would, first of all, like you to introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your background, which I don't know myself. I mean, we've never met in real
Sure.
life.
Sure.
Uh, yeah, that would be
Yeah.
great.
My
So, could,
background, my original background is actually in healthcare, and I worked at Massachusetts General Hospital in the neurology service.
okay.
For a long
Hmm.
time, I was initially doing research in neurodegenerative diseases, so things like Huntington's and Parkinson's disease.
Okay.
Working in a lab, wearing a lab coat, not not
Okay.
seeing
Yeah. Uh-huh.
patients, but working with clinicians who are also doing clinical research in Huntington's and Parkinson's disease. And I started using computers as part of my research, as a tool. And I
Hmm.
started actually getting more interested over time in how the computer could be used as a tool to connect people with information and also connect people with other people. So, so I was
Okay.
because one of the big things in research is obviously collaboration, right? You have to work with
Hmm.
other
Hmm.
people,
Yeah.
especially if you're working on something
Yeah.
very complex like the human brain. You have so many people who have to specialize to get their heads around different areas of expertise, and you have to work
Absolutely.
together.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And have you been involved in any research in clinical research in virtual worlds,
Yeah,
or is that
Yeah, actually,
outside?
that came along. That's part of the story, So what happened was I started getting more interested in computers as tools to connect people with each other and people with data, and I started getting interested in online communities for sharing research information, but also for patient support because I realized over time that the greatest source of uh, of help to people in
Hmm.
healthcare are other people. Uh, it's really about the
Yes,
community,
yes.
right? So I got involved in early projects involving the pre-web, pre-World Wide Web, things like
Hmm.
dial-up bulletin boards, for people to
Okay.
communicate and
Uh-huh.
share information and have online communities. And then over time, I started getting interested in more immersive online environments. So things like early versions of Active Worlds. It's a 3D virtual world, and there's
Hmm.
something called a virtual world called The Palace, which was sort of like a 2D flat kind of world. But they were all multi-user online worlds where people were interacting with each other and interacting with
Hmm.
information. So that really started to take off as a really strong interest in me. And then I actually even started using, all kinds of tools I could find to help connect people with each other and virtual reality
Hmm.
stuff, really early stuff as well. Just the idea of perceptual immersion was really interesting to me.
Hmm.
So at this time, I realized I was more interested in really a lot of this, how these technologies could be applied to help people and patients and caregivers and researchers come together. And so I shifted gears with my career, and I shifted over more into the computer science side of things, still working at
Hmm.
Mass General in the neurology service, and and then
Hmm.
I started looking at using. I started looking at using Second Life actually as an online environment to help people dealing with Asperger's syndrome and autism spectrum uh, situations to help them practice their socialization skills in multi-user environments. And we found actually that we found some interesting results from that. One of them being that the confidence that they gained in these simulations
Hmm.
transferred to the confidence that they felt in physical world situations. So it was a success. It was
Yeah.
the same way a flight simulator will train a pilot to actually fly a real plane better. These
Yeah.
simulations of multi-user social situations that, if for some of these people were
Hmm.
very difficult to deal with, they actually helped them gain confidence that transferred into the physical world. And so, uh,
That's fantastic. So I suppose there's some literature about that You've written something about
There's
it?
some
Just
papers that we collaborated on. We also there was also a paper on using virtual worlds to help people with relaxation response training. So actually, I'll
okay.
find
Hmm.
that one for you. I can find that one because some of this stuff was, some of this stuff was really out there, and and at the time,
Yeah, you were early to start with. I
yeah.
mean, now other people are following, or
Well,
you know,
it's a convergent evolution, I think. I think it's just an
yeah.
ideas that, people realize over time have value.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Parkinson. That especially interests me because Drax, he made a film about this lady who has a Parkinson
Mm.
condition, and she learned to move in Second Life, which had an influence on her
Yeah.
real life activities, and that fascinated me. And I read, can you say something about that? Have you got
Yeah, yeah.
experience
I mean,
there?
it all comes. Well, another thing about my past is that, after I started using Second Life, because I was in beta with Second Life, because I knew about Second Life. I learned about Second Life because I was at a meeting that Mitch Caper was at MIT, because I was living in Boston at the time, and he said, I just invested in this company called Linden Lab. You should check out this virtual world they're building. It didn't have a name yet. They were calling it Linden
Mhm.
World, right? And so that's how I learned
Okay.
about Second Life while I was at Mass General, and I got really excited about that. And fast forward a few years, I ended up actually leaving Mass General and working at Linden Lab, right? I
Oh,
worked at Linden
yeah.
Lab for 5 years, and my focus there was how
Wow.
was really the education and immersive learning market.
Mhm.
How Second Life could be used as a tool to help people, um, both in education and also in healthcare as well. And the big
Mhm.
traction that I saw with Second Life and healthcare was around, people who were dealing with different conditions in the physical world that limited their ability to do certain things in the physical world. So that could be.
So you are involved in this virtual
Yeah, I'm on the
ability,
board of
yes.
directors for virtual
Mm.
ability. So, and
Yeah.
actually, if you look through the history of virtual ability, there's a woman, Sojourner, who was a key person in virtual ability in the early days. And she's someone who I brought into Second Life as part of this research project that I was doing with autism
Okay.
spectrum disorder people at Mass General. So
Mhm.
it's like a
Mhm.
long story. It has
Mhm.
connections everywhere. So what I realized was that, well, first of all, just, the human brain is very plastic. It's a very plastic
Mhm.
and flexible, uh, wonderful, magical organ that we have, and it learns always, and it's always looking for ways to, you know express itself using whatever tools are available. And, like if you hurt your foot, your brain figures out with your body how to walk, even though you may have a problem with your
Mhm.
foot. And so, you would find people who in the physical world were dealing with things like mobility issues, or maybe even paralysis and things like that. And then they would come into Second Life, and then they would have this sense of real freedom of being in this environment that would allow them to do things that they couldn't do in the physical world. But then at the same time, you would see different levels of feedback affecting their ability to do things better in the physical world. So the same way someone who,
Mhm.
could use Second Life as a way to help train themselves in social situations in a 3D simulated space, and then come into the physical world and they feel
Mhm.
more confident. It's really interesting how, I mean, yes, when you're walking in a 3D virtual world, you're not actually walking, but there's so much we don't understand yet about the brain, but the brain is learning and getting. I think a lot of it has to do with confidence also. You're getting
Yeah.
confident that you could do it, and then when you're in the physical world, you maybe are able to do it more and do it better. So something like a Parkinson's
Mhm.
patient who is able to, whose work in Second Life actually helps them, improves their ability in terms of physical interactions in the physical
Mhm.
world, doesn't surprise me at all. You see it
Yeah.
all.
Well, I mean, there are lots of emotions and all that
Yeah.
involved. I mean, even if you're not, if you have no physical problems or anything, but I get the creeps when it's dark and I suddenly hear a noise when I'm walking along a lonely road in Second Life, and I
Yeah.
go, ah,
Yeah. Yeah,
this kind of thing.
exactly.
So I think that's the emotional stuff. Yeah. So actually, my specific field is machinima and making machinima. Have you ever been involved in machinima making?
I was when I was at Linden Lab, there were some um, I was involved in people making some machinima in Second Life. The real problem with that is that, you can't, well, at least back then, I mean, now you have ways of dealing with the whole, like, how do I have an NPC doing things in the environment, right? Uh, back in the day when I was doing stuff at Linden Lab, there were no, at that time at least yet, NPCs. And so you had to have all these humans as sort of extras, like on a set, and you had to tell them what to do in a
Okay. Thank you, John. This conversation was interrupted and will be continued at a later stage. Goodbye.